number 2 today, but if you keep showing up every day, someday you will be number 1. So I look at her. Is this true? This would not have happened if we stayed home that night. You know, I find that the meaning and purpose of your life is not in your bed, it's not in your house, it's not on your couch. Otherwise, you would have found it by now. Somebody was asking me last period about trying to find their archetype, and he was saying the same thing. He took some of those tests, and that they came back with some slightly different answers, but generally the same kind of core thing that he was looking for. And he was trying to figure out exactly what he was. He was asking, how do I really figure it out? And so I told him that the way I discovered my archetype is the same way that a close friend of mine discovered his archetype. He looked at his shadow self. He looked at the negative aspects of his personality. Because if you remember, you have the archetype, and then you have the thing that you can become if you're not careful with it. So, for example, he identified himself as the ruler archetype because he saw himself that when he went into kind of like these dark moments, what he became was a tyrant. So he was able to look at himself and say, gosh, when I start doing everything wrong, I become a tyrant. And then he looked at the persona aspect of that, or the positive aspect of that, and then he realized, the opposite of the tyrant is the ruler. And so he kind of discovered that that's what he was. And he still sees himself today when things start to go badly in his life. He starts to pursue those negative aspects of himself, and that's what he becomes. That's how I discovered mine as well. Is that I kind of already knew, but when I started seeing myself in my worst moments of behavior, I was asking myself, what do you become when you are your worst? And I saw what I become when I'm my worst, and I realized, okay, that matches perfectly with what I've seen in other areas of my life, my archetype. And so one of the ways that you discover your archetype is you can look at yourself in your worst possible moments and see what it is that you become. Do you become a tyrant? Do you become an elitist? Do you become a villain? What is it that you become when you're at your worst? And you can kind of backtrack from there and realize, I should be doing the opposite of what I am, which is just intuitive. We know that, especially if you can look at yourself and say, this is who I am when I'm at my worst. And then you can work backwards from there to see what you could therefore become if you were always at your best. You become the archetype of being a proper ruler. And a ruler doesn't necessarily just mean that you're in charge of everybody and you get to tell you what to do. Sometimes it's just about leadership. Being a ruler isn't just telling people what to do. Being a ruler is also showing people what it is that you should do. It's like Marcus Aurelius was somebody from last period before he left. He's been reading Meditations, and he said that his favorite quote from Marcus Aurelius was something to the effect of, stop arguing what a good person is and just go become one. So how do you make a difference in the world that way? Well, you give people the model of what to be. And of course we know this. I mean, the guy died almost 2,000 years ago, and we're still talking about him today. And not just here, but all around the world. And what did the guy do? He was an emperor, true, in terms of like what he accomplished for Rome. It wasn't like spectacular. It wasn't like he tripled the size of the border. It wasn't like he did great things for the economy. In fact, there were some problematic things that he did for the economy of Rome. But what we remember him as instead is as a good man. When Elon Musk dies, what are we going to remember him for? Made some electric cars, SpaceX. Well, we will remember him for some good things, but think about it in terms of history. How many people do we remember specifically because they were a good person? And it's daunting when you look at that and you're just like, wow, because most of us won't have the audience that Marcus Aurelius had, because he was an emperor, so he has a built-in audience of people who are going to be interested in what he has to say and reading what he has to write. Most of us won't have that, so I guess then the question becomes, do we want to be a good person because we want to be remembered as one? Or do we want to be a good person because we want to fulfill that part of our personality that begs for goodness? When we do bad things, we feel it. And it's not, again, just what we feel for ourselves, but what we do to other people. If you are a role model to people and you do badly, and then they discover those bad things about you, it doesn't just harm you in terms of your ego. It takes away a person's ability to now look up to people and admire people. You damage that person's ability to have role models, which is one of the reasons that, like I say very clearly from early on, I am not a role model. I don't want to get any false impressions about anything, but I hope that you do have role models in your life. whatever there. And you can have role models in different areas. Like if you're a musician, maybe you have some musical role models. But our musical role models probably shouldn't be our moral role models. There are people that we should aspire to be more like. You know, not that we want to be them, but we can see what it is that they struggle through. And then we can kind of remind ourselves that we want to be remembered as that kind of a person. And Marcus Aurelius is one of those. Dostoevsky is an interesting guy also for that. This is probably the closest picture I have to him smiling. He is not a smiler. Every picture he looks very grim and serious. But if you ever want to be blown away, look up Fyodor Dostoevsky quotes on love. And the way that this guy writes about love, you just sit there and go, is that the same guy from that picture? It's unbelievable what this guy writes about it. Yeah? So there's something that's there as well. Maybe it's not a role model of how to look, unless you're into beards, but it's a role model of how to see the world. Maybe not even a role model of how to behave in the world, but certainly a role model of how to see things in the world. It's like, I wonder if any of you guys have that person that you look at and you just go, I just like the way that they see things. You know, I like the way that they talk about things. And those are good people to have in your life, because they expose you to a view of the world that you never would have had otherwise. It opens up your life and your ability now to experience things that you never would have experienced. You can experience 10 lifetimes before, whereas you maybe before that would have experienced half of one. But it's the ability to interpret, no, not interpret, sorry. It's your ability to perceive the world, make sense of it, and internalize it that allows you to exist in it in some kind of a meaningful way. And so he's saying that there's a mystery of human existence, and it is a mystery. We ask that question, why are we here? And it makes no sense. Like, we can't, like, I can't emphasize it enough. Like, why are we even conscious? That doesn't make any sense. And the question itself doesn't make sense to a lot of people because it's such, I mean, we couldn't even ask that question unless we were conscious. So it's almost like this question of like, well, we're conscious just because we are. Yep, but why? Like, there's nothing in the brain, this physical thing, that suggests that we should have anything abstract and non-physical, such as consciousness. And we've been trying to figure it out for thousands of years, literally. And we're no closer today than we were when the Greeks were trying to figure out why we're conscious. And that's a wonderful thing because it's that self-consciousness that allows me to be self-aware to the point that I can have, you know, relationships with people. And I can experience the world as Scanlon, not just as like a member of a species that, you know, runs around the world, but you can experience the world as you, because without your consciousness, there's no you to talk about. You only makes sense if you have this consciousness. And so your consciousness is literally everything about you, and every human being who's ever lived before. But without that, none of this makes any sense. And then that question, of course, why are we even conscious in the first place, becomes a true mystery, but an unbelievably beautiful one, because it's what makes existence worthwhile. You know, when someone dies, what do we lose? We don't just lose a body. We lose a personality. We lose a set of experiences. I was talking to somebody recently, I was thinking, like, the only tragedy I can think of with regards to my own death is going to be that everything I've learned and studied and experienced just goes away, like that. And that only makes sense if we're thinking of it in terms of consciousness. When your cat or your dog dies, what do you miss? Yeah, their physical presence in your life, the way they would wag their tail. It's not going to be the conversations that you had. It's not going to be the meaning that they contribute to your understanding. It's going to be their physical presence in their life, and then what do? We go get a new dog after a little while. We don't forget the old one. That doesn't mean that somehow we degrade the old one. It just means that we understand that bodies are replaceable. Bodies are replaceable, but consciousnesses are not. Psyches are not. People. The person themselves, not the mortal coil, but the thing that they are, is irreplaceable, because that set of experiences and their beautiful or grotesque way of seeing the world, whatever it is, goes away with them. And there's this incredible mystery that lies not just in staying alive, you know. And staying alive is important. I hope you all do it for quite a while. But what matters long life if it isn't filled with with something. And so we have to find something to live for, not just to stay alive. But that is the first step, by the way, staying alive. Because if you don't stay alive, you're never going to find the thing that makes staying alive worthwhile. How do we become happy? How do we find that meaning? How do we find that purpose? You have to do a lot of stuff. You have to do a lot of stuff. What should you try? Yes, within reason. Don't try flying off of a bridge. It's not going to work. But, there's a saying I once heard, something to the effect of, if someone offers you a seat on a rocket ship, don't ask where it's going, just get on board. And I'm sure you've all seen that meme, the car pulls up and says, get in. Where are we going? What does it matter? Get in. Be cautious, because you don't want to get into a car that's planning to fly off of a bridge. But how do you discover the things that you enjoy? By trying things. How do you learn about foods that you like? Try it. Try it. Try it. How do you find the things that were worth taking a risk for in life? Well, you try it. And sometimes you're limping away being like, oh, shouldn't have tried that. Now I know for the future. And there are other things that you're going to try that you're going to say, I don't know if that's a good idea. What if I get embarrassed by it? Should I do it? Yeah. Yeah. We have these studies. I say it. Gottfried was his name. That's who it was. It was studies on tracking old people, especially in the months before they die, and they're being asked about the regrets. It's incredible when you talk to younger people and you ask about the regrets that they have, and then you talk to old people who are within 6 months of dying was their criteria, and they were asked what they regret. The kinds of things that younger people regret are things that they tried. Oh, I shouldn't have done this. I shouldn't have made this effort. I shouldn't have gone for this. It was a bad idea. When you talk to old people who are looking back, it's all the complete opposite. It's all the things that they didn't try. When I was younger, I should have tried this. I should have done that. I should have taken this risk. I should have gone for this opportunity. It's always the things that you don't try. Those are the things that linger. And when you're younger and you have something that you tried and it embarrasses you, oh, I asked my crush out and she said no. It's embarrassing, yeah. But what's worse is when you get to be like in your 60s and 70s and you look back and you say, I wonder what would have happened if I'd asked that person out. Like my whole life would have been in such an incredibly different direction. I think it was you guys I was telling that the whole reason I'm talking to you right now was because I went to a coffee shop on a Thursday night and I shouldn't have been there. I told you this, yes? I was in I won't tell you the whole story, but I was in a band, and the band would rehearse Monday through Thursday, and it was just on schedule. We always did it. Monday, Wednesday, Thursday. And there was one Thursday, I couldn't even tell you why. But the band, we didn't rehearse. So rather than going to rehearsal, I went to a coffee shop. And I met a person, and then that kind of led on this whole long series of events that without having gone to that coffee shop that night, I would not be standing here in front of you right now. It's a weird thing. I could have stayed home and read, and I wouldn't be standing in front of you right now. And you're going to find that a lot of things in life are like that. And you won't even know it. The really hard things are the ones that you can look back on and say, I wonder, what if I had tried? What if I had taken the risk for this? What if I had, talked to my crush? Oh, would you have been embarrassed? You're over the embarrassment within, a short period of time, relatively short period of time. But you can never go back and try that later on and see what would have happened. Would your life have been better or worse? Yeah. Yeah. It would have been better in some ways, worse in others. But it would have been better in the sense that you would have taken the risk and you wouldn't have that regret. It would be worse if you didn't do it, because at least because you would have that regret later on. And regret is a hard thing to live with, man. And so the mystery of existence isn't just staying alive, but it's finding something to live for. Whatever it is, man, I don't know. For you, I don't know. For me, I absolutely know. Yeah, but you have to find it. And I mean that. You have to. You have to. Because without it, it's going to be hard to wake up in the morning. It's going to be hard to get out of bed. But you got to try things. happiness is not something that you can pursue. I'll give you that heads up. You cannot go look for happiness. Happiness has to come from something that you're doing. You can't pursue happiness. Happiness has to ensue. It has to come from what you're doing. How do you know what you're doing is going to make you happy? You find yourself at one moment going, this makes me happy. And you're going to find it in some of the strangest places. Some of you are going to be asked by someone to come over to their house and do some gardening with them. I have no interest in gardening. Just try it. See what happens. You might find something interesting in it. You know, take a risk. What's the worst that happens? The worst that happens is you don't have a regret. A long-term regret. But, you know. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques? What's that? Where do I start? Experience. I don't want to miss a thing. I want to do everything. Sometimes twice. Don't do drugs. Okay? Don't do them. They're bad for you in lots and lots of ways. They're easy to get addicted to. This is why I don't do drugs, because I know myself. I would take all of them if I did drugs. I've had alcohol once in my life. There's a reason I don't drink. I know myself. If I drank, I would drink all of it. And people don't typically believe me. They think, oh, no, Scott, you had to drink. Do any of you believe that, from what you've seen so far from my personality, that I could function in society if I drank? No. No. We'd have like 2 or 3 weird lectures before the school board finally, revoked my license and kicked me out of a classroom. But having said that, I'm glad I had the experience. Because that's the thing I live for. I want to try everything. I don't want to miss a thing, man.
You have a bucket list?
Yeah, I mean, it's all around you. Just look in the world. Everything I want to do. What's that?
Have you jumped out of a plane?
I have.
For radio?
What's that?
For radio?
Why did I lie to you about that? Yes, I've gone skydiving before. I have. I've even gone cliff diving. I've gone bungee diving. Why? I have an anxiety of heights. When I start thinking about high places, my palms are getting sweaty. Any of you guys are like that? So what do? When my palms get sweaty, I'm like, oh, this is a bad idea. I shouldn't do this. I put the parachute on. I'm like, let's go. We gotta do this. Why? Because shyness is nice, right? But shyness can stop you from doing the things that you really want to do in life. And fears are sometimes in place. Yes, exactly. The Smiths. Fear is a way of your nervous system telling you, don't do this thing. And what else is more courageous in life than facing those things and doing them anyway? Is it going to kill me? Maybe. That's part of the thing about it. But if you're afraid if you're afraid of dying, I know it's a cliche, but it's true. If you're afraid of dying, then you can't really live because you can't go do those things. You have to. If some opportunities before you sit there and go like, oh, I shouldn't do this. That's probably an indication that maybe you shouldn't, depending on what it is. So puts a kilo of Coke in front of you and says, hey man, can you take this somewhere for me? Maybe not a good idea. But if you have done it before, you have an experience that you can share with people. It's a little more aspect of a life that you've lived. And that's my thing. I don't want to miss a thing. So the thing that gets me up every day is kind of like, what's my experience today going to be? What weird opportunity is going to come my way? Weird shit happens to me all the time. This is indeed the strangest life that I've ever known, no doubt. I told you about going to In-N-Out, number 1.
Do you get a hamburger at In-N-Out?
No, I do not. But I did meet number 1 at In-N-Out. And so she says, so if we go out right now, something interesting is going to happen. And in my head I'm thinking, absolutely. And I said, yeah, probably. It was like 11 o'clock at night. She's like, all right, well, let's go somewhere. So I went and picked her up, and then I asked her, are you hungry? She goes, yeah. I go, let's go to In-N-Out. And we went to In-N-Out. We're standing in line. She kept harassing me about it. She's like, nothing interesting has happened yet. I said, of course something interesting has happened. We came together tonight. Here we are out in the world. And so we're going up to the counter, and there's a guy in front of us, and he's paying. And the woman behind the counter goes, all right, sir, here's your change. You are number 1. Hands him the thing. And the guy says, I'm number 1. And he turns to the restaurant and goes, I'm number 1! So I started cheering for him. And then the whole place breaks into applause for this guy. And he starts running, and he's running around the restaurant. He's high-fiving people. He gets back to the front by the counter. He's like, I don't know, I wasn't ready for this today. Where do I start? I want to thank so many people. He's like, where's number 99? Where are you at? And there's a guy in the back. He's raises his hand. He's all, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. You made me number 1. And he turned to me and my friend. He's like, you guys are number 2 today. But if you keep showing up every day, someday you will be number 1. He's this whole speech. So I look at her. Is this true? This would not have happened if we stayed home that night. You know, I find that the meaning and purpose of your life is not in your bed, it's not in your house, it's not in your couch. Otherwise, you would have found it by now. I'm not saying great things can't happen in those places. I'm just saying that's not where you're going to find the most interesting things of your life.